Hi. So yesterday, which was Tuesday, November 18th, the Board of Supervisors met. We also had this kind of, interlude where for 2 hours we sat down with the City of Tucson for a joint Board of Supervisors City of Tucson meeting. I will talk about that maybe at the very end. So for the board, a few of the key things that happened. Just kind of running through in the order that things were written on the agenda, our office introduced a resolution at the suggestion of Mr. Phineas Anderson. If his name rings a bell, it is because he and his wife were the folks who started some of the protests outside the Tesla dealerships that spread like wildfire across the country. He is local. He has also reached out to us to see if we would introduce a resolution that we did, and it was passed, that really calls on, it denounces the overreach of the executive branch of our government, calls on our Congress as well as the judicial branch to pay attention to the Constitution that outlines very clear separation of powers between the executive, the legislative, and the judicial, and warns against the overreach of the federal government, or of the executive branch of the Trump administration in this particular case. So it was a resolution calling for protection of democracy and upholding the U.S. Constitution. It passed with a 4-1 vote. We also approved yesterday 4 contracts that total $3.4 million that go to Banner, Palo Verde, Sonora, and Connections. These are all mental health service providers, and the county awarded contracts to each of them for them to conduct some of our statutory obligations. Like the county's required in statute to do mental health evaluations when they are needed, and especially when they're court ordered. So this is just part of our work and support of mental health services across the county. We also had a matter that I voted for that was introduced by my colleague in the next office, Supervisor Christie from District 4, that would call on our state lobbyists to do some work to try to put an end to the uptick in home title fraud that is happening not just here but around the country. People are preying on older folks in particular, and somehow manage through some conniving and scheming to acquire people's home titles. And it has had devastating impacts on folks who suddenly realize that they have lost title to their home. So it's an issue that I've heard about in District 3, and I know the county is concerned about it. So thank you to Supervisor Christie for bringing this up. And I believe that passed on a 5-0 vote, which is kind of uncommon. Our office introduced an item yesterday as well about SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and the new requirements that have been rolled out as part of HR 1. The requirements are trying to make it more difficult for people to be eligible to receive food assistance. The requirements are now that people will need to demonstrate, people who were previously receiving SNAP benefits would need to demonstrate 80 hours a month of work, volunteering, some kind of training program, or that they are exempt. Let's be clear, the ultimate goal from the Trump administration is to whittle down the number of people who receive food assistance and to make the process to receive it as difficult, cumbersome as possible, and probably to just end it altogether. So these new requirements are meant to be difficult. This is going to have far-reaching, devastating effects. People will lose their food benefits. We're talking about veterans, seniors, kids who are getting out of the foster care system, working families who cannot afford food based on our based on our low wages in our community. We all know that people are making decisions every day between food and rent, food and the mortgage, food and the utilities. And then we know that on the horizon comes increased healthcare premiums, as well as cuts to eligibility on access. So our social safety net is being rapidly eroded. So what we got passed and what we introduced yesterday was an item that directs the county administrator to look at all the departments and the programs that the county has to see if there are opportunities, creative opportunities in which the county can help people meet the work, the volunteer, the training eligibility requirements so that people are not falling through the gaps, and that we can also help people fill out the paperwork because I think the new requirements are also going to be much more cumbersome for people to demonstrate and keep their eligibility. I wanted to thank three speakers actually that we brought in to help us understand kind of the scale and the scope of this problem and of how many people are on SNAP, etc. We had Ms. Geraldine Miranda, who is the Economic Policy Analyst for the Children's Action Alliance and the Arizona Center for Economic Progress. We also had Meheria Habibi, who's the Deputy Director of Programs for the International Rescue Committee of Arizona and is also the Director of IRC in Tucson. And we had Shamsuddin Zamani, who's a refugee from Afghanistan, who worked with the U.S. military when in Afghanistan. They all spoke powerfully about the absolute importance of addressing this issue and ensuring that people continue to receive their food assistance. So we look forward to hearing back from the county about ways that we can help ensure that people maintain their eligibility. You may recall at the last meeting there was an item that was continued that had been introduced by Supervisor Hines to provide some emergency assistance to food banks and refugee organizations. So that turned into a proposal from the administration, the county administration, to create an emergency fund that is about $800,000 that nonprofit organizations could apply for based on, trying to fill the need right now for food assistance, housing assistance, eviction assistance, transportation. And we actually added to it at the meeting legal services in case that is a necessary new hurdle for folks to be able to continue to receive their food, their housing, or transportation assistance. So it was a new kind of category added. That passed, I believe, on a 4-1 vote, and I think it was rolled out today, this morning. It has a fairly short window, early December, that nonprofits have. Minimum of $25,000, maximum of $75,000 for grants. And so if this relates to you, or you know other organizations that have been funded by the county in the past, which is one of the requisites, you need to be kind of in our system, please do apply. We had also Supervisor Cano from District 5 introduced the One Pima initiative. Very thankful for Supervisor Cano's work and the administration and kind of pulling this together. Essentially, it is, kind of do it justice in a short period of time. The full title is reaffirming fentanyl as a public health crisis and establishing the One Pima initiative. So essentially, it is a kind of a plan. It pulls together, it compiles a lot of the work that the county is doing in a few different categories. So there are 5 categories: loop cleanup and public safety, public health and treatment and diversion expansion, meaning kind of the courts, diversion, instead of going to the jail, being diverted out into other programs, generally related to mental health and substance use disorder. Housing and homelessness stabilization, and then 5th, supporting neighbors and small businesses. So the plan has those categories. It details some of the programs and the funding that the county provides in each of those areas, reaffirms our commitment to all of what is currently in our budget. And then there were a few new areas that were kind of put on the table. They would show up in our next fiscal year, which would start July 1. And so it would be some expansions. Some proposals some expansions are proposed within the One Pima initiative, but they won't be voted on until the next budget cycle. If you look it up, it's a great snapshot, I think, of the significant commitment and investment of the county around both homelessness and treating the opioid fentanyl crisis as well as the mental health crisis. Much more to be done, but I think it's a good starting point to see it all together. We approved yesterday the first recommendation that came out of the ROSAC, which stands for Regional Opioid Settlement Advisory Committee. So this is the opioid settlement money, right? All the pharmaceutical companies that contributed to people getting hooked on opioids got a large class action suit, had to pay out a bunch of money. The county got a big lump sum, as did other municipalities. We pooled our money. We created an advisory committee that has representatives from the different municipalities that agreed to work together. That group did a whole lot of research, looked at a whole bunch of data, came up with some priorities, issued some requests for proposals, and we just got the first one back. It is for what is being called a SAFER Center. It's an acronym, SAFR, but essentially it is a detox facility, an expansion, in fact, of detox services that is being provided by Community Bridges. And it's a place where folks can go instead of going to the emergency room, instead of going jail, to detox. So we approved the recommendation of contracting with Community Bridges for almost $1.9 million to expand these services. This is considered a pilot project to sort of see how this goes and if it can be expanded on in the future. So, joint City of Tucson Board of Supervisors meeting. We took a little break, so from 12:30 to 2:30, we all met at the meeting room of the Pima Association of Governments. We heard presentations both from the city and from the county about the work that we are doing individually, but then the idea was to see it somewhat collectively around homelessness and fentanyl opioid crisis. And then we heard from Mayor Romero, Chair Scott from the Pima County Board of Supervisors, and then all the council members and all the Board of Supervisors. We all kind of chimed in around things that we think are important and opportunities that we have to be able to work together. I talked about kind of three, the way I sort of see the work in kind of three categories. One being around kind of harm reduction and kind of those small steps to get folks into safer places and safer spaces. The social safety net, and then kind of going upstream and getting this, going upstream. So for the pieces around harm reduction and some of those smaller steps, I really think that we need to work a lot more between the city and the county around opportunities for things like the Star Village, having safe places for people to camp. We need safe places for people to park and stay overnight. And we need safe places for people to use drugs and not overdose. These are all things that are done in other communities, and they have an incredible effect in ensuring that people do not overdose, but also start people with taking small steps with that, rather than trying to take a big leap in getting into treatment programs or getting into housing if people are not quite ready yet, and to make that shift. That getting people into safer places is an important first step, where they can then be positioned to take bigger and bigger steps. Around the social safety net, well, there are many things that we are doing and need to do more of. One of the things that I had recommended was around having a better sense of, and an ongoing daily tally of how many shelter beds we have available and where, how many detox and recovery beds that we have available and where, and who is eligible to use them. Having a better sense of where we can be directing people across both city and county programs would be a powerful, a good step in alignment and cohesion, and also some more clarity around where there are some gaps and needs. And then around them going upstream, the city and the county have both approved the Prosperity Initiative, which is a framework for combating systemic inequity and building the foundations, putting the building blocks in place for people and our community, right, to build greater prosperity, better generational wealth and stability. I think we should continue to work on that together and ensure that we are making progress. So that's all I got, I think, for this meeting. We got another one coming up on December 12th. And as always, feel free to reach out with any questions, comments, or concerns. Thanks.